Ambassador, with due respect to you, the Taliban and so on, and the Americans were very much present in the 1990s, as you well know, because we were using and inculcating and encouraging the Taliban from all over the world to come there.
Those were the
In
majority.
the name of jihad, to
He should know his history.
Overturn
those
the
were the
Soviet
majority.
occupation. So no,
the majority
we cannot.
those were the 80s.
No, we cannot talk.
Those were the 1980s.
We cannot
you
talk.
are mixing up the 1990s
Right. We cannot talk
with the
from both
1980s.
sides of our.
So get your facts right.
We cannot
Mr.
talk.
Siddiqui.
All right, one moment.
Yes.
Haroon, go ahead.
We cannot talk from both sides of our mouth. We cannot say that jihadism then was a good thing, and now we cannot say jihadism is a bad thing. I think what it is boiling down to, what the ambassador says in part is correct. What Luke says in part is correct. I'm trying to focus on the overall picture. We have heard each one of these rationales before, and we are not exactly where we were 10 years ago, but somewhere exactly where we were 10 years ago. So this country is still in a mess. All this boils down to is to ensure that the current government is not toppled, which is a laudable goal. I can agree with that, but I do not hear coherence and overall coherence in what we are doing. If Mr. Trump wants to go after Pakistan tonight, which he may want to, we can be guaranteed that exactly what will happen, what has already happened before. Afghans blame Pakistan, Pakistan blames America and the others, and we are going in circles constantly.
Okay.
So each one of us partially is correct, but overall it remains a mess.
I'm sorry, I have to correct this. The 1980s, when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, saw the emergence of Mujahideen and the Afghan people who fought the Soviet Union. Mr. Siddiqui's old country, Pakistan, was at the forefront as well. The whole world
It's not my old country. Excuse me.
Including the Chinese help.
This is McCarthyism. This is McCarthyism, Ambassador. I'm not from Pakistan, so don't try that tactics. I'm not from Pakistan. Don't
the 1990s saw the emergence of the Taliban.
Of the worst kind.
The 1990s saw the emergence of the Taliban in 94, 95. There was no Taliban before 94, 95. And to equate the Mujahideen of the 1980s with the Taliban of the 1990s and today is absolutely horrendous and wrong.
Let me bring in Wenping. Wenping, I mean, you're listening to this. There is instability in that part of Asia and that part of the world. How concerned is China over what is happening there?
Of course, like China is bordering with Afghanistan and also Pakistan. And especially like our Xinjiang Uyghur autonomous region, they have been directly influenced from those instability in Afghanistan and also those border area within Pakistan. So that's why China now has been increasing our effort trying to bring the peace and stability in that part of area. In China, Xinjiang area, we have facing those troublemaker, like we call it Eastern Turkestan Islamic movement. So this movement has been made lots of those terror activity, not only in Xinjiang Uyghur autonomous region, sometimes even goes to other provinces in China. So, and according to some numbers, some resources saying as many as hundreds of those Chinese, and also they now are fighting, join those jihadists fighting in the Syria and in the Iraqi. So those has been caused a lot of danger for the security in China. So that's why we cannot just remain those silence or remain isolated, stay away from what's happening in Afghanistan. And also, that's our concern.
Look, when we look at a conflict like this, it sometimes throws up very strange bedfellows. We heard earlier on President Trump saying that he inherited, quote, a mess. In fact, in that respect, the Taliban agrees with him. And it said in an open letter, the Taliban said, we've noticed, addressing President Trump, you have understood the errors of your predecessors and to thoroughly rethink your new strategy in Afghanistan. You must also not hand over the Afghan issue to warmongering generals, but must make a decision where history shall remember you as an advocate for peace.
Well, they would say that, wouldn't they? I'm sure they would say that anytime there's a new president to plead with them to pursue a new strategy, the one that would empower the Taliban and help bring them into full control of the country. I think what we're seeing coming out of the White House right now is that the adults are in charge. those that were around President Trump, some of the alt-right bloggers blogging from their mother's basement, who think they know more about military strategy than the tried and tested generals of the U.S. Department of Defense. They have been silenced, and I think we saw this with Steve Bannon's departure on Friday. I mean, some of these proposals being flown out there about, you know, privatizing the war and all this other nonsense, appointing a viceroy. This stuff is just ridiculous, and it doesn't work in the real world. But what we're seeing coming out of the White House is a responsible and realistic strategy going forward for the U.S. and Afghanistan. We have training missions all around the world in different countries as guests of different countries, and we should start seeing our presence in Afghanistan in a lot of the same way. And with the focus on the regional strategy, I think we should finally stop seeing Afghanistan for what it isn't, which is this broader Middle East narrative that we heard over a decade about what Afghanistan is, and start seeing it for what it really is, which is a Central and South Asian country. Historically, linguistically, culturally, religiously, it is Central and South Asian. And if we start seeing it within this context, we start seeing how Afghanistan and stability in Afghanistan is connected to so many other issues that the U.S. cares about in the region.
Right. Okay, Haroon, you know, the United States at this stage is engaged in changing its strategy, looking at new ways of dealing with this problem. But things on the ground, of course, are changing. As Ambassador Omar Samad told us just a moment ago, ISIL is now involved in Afghanistan as well. There was a UN investigation that just concluded that ISIL and the Taliban jointly attacked a village in northern Afghanistan, killing 36 people. And the UN says that this is possibly a war crime. How does ISIL's involvement in Afghanistan complicate the situation there?
Of course, it complicates the situation, and it's an unstable situation. You see, one ought not to, when one criticizes, one does a critique of the American policy, one does it as a friend of the United States and a neighbor of the United States. No question Taliban are horrible people. No question ISIS should be dealt with. All of those in isolation are fine. What I keep talking about, and Luke referred to this correctly, this is a South Asian issue. It needs to be tackled in that context. Only question is, it's absolutely welcome that all the lunatics in White House and around Trump have been silenced, that the adults are in charge. Good. There'll be semi-coherent strategy tonight, agreed. My issue really is, haven't we heard this before? Of course, we cannot abandon Afghanistan. Of course, we cannot abandon the government in Afghanistan. We have to keep propping them up. It is the interest of the ambassador to say so. I agree with him on that. I'm still not hearing an overall coherent long-term strategy. Where would we be in 4 months' time? That's what I would want to hear from Luke, because what he says is correct. I agree with him. But do we still have a strategy that will take us beyond 4 months, beyond 6 months, beyond a year? What do we see here? That's the real issue here.
Ambassador?
The real issue is that we need to make sure that Afghanistan does not become a hub for terrorism again, that is not a threat to itself, to China, to Russia, to Iran, to Pakistan, or anyone. What we saw in the 1980s and 90s, the mistakes made in the 90s, and then 9/11, and then beyond that, we have a lot to learn from the lessons of the past. And I think that what we need to do is now focus on a strategy that has that at its heart, making sure that terrorism does not pose a threat from that region of the world to the region or beyond that. And I think that maybe for the first time in the last 16 years, they're going to go beyond just the rhetoric and beyond just the niceties of what could be a diplomatic outcome. And I think they're going to look at it from a more realistic perspective. And I hope that 4 or 5 or 6 months or a year from now, we will sit here again and say, well, at least it's moving in the right direction.
But Ambassador, as you said earlier on, it's time for the Taliban to put down their arms, contest elections like anybody else would be allowed to contest elections in Afghanistan. But is it also time for the United States, for the Afghan central government, others involved, to also say, yes, we're going to have to negotiate with the Taliban initially to get them into this process, rather than say we don't talk to terrorists?
Sure, and you have to reach that point. And we are at a stage where we are not close to that point.
Right.
We are very far from that point.
Okay.
And we need to change the modality in such a way that we will reach the table and we can start talking about how they can become active and productive and healthy members of that society once again.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks to all of you for joining us. That's it for this edition of The Heat, but the conversation continues online. Join us on CGTN America's Facebook page to comment on this or any other show, or chat with us on Twitter at CGTN America. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for being with us.